Started thinking about things like this, and it was a pretty dark phase. I realized that, even if someone told me that I'm never going to make the IMO team and my selection tests are not going to go well at all, I would still want to prepare the same way.
Realistically speaking, do you believe that determination and consistent hard work alone can lead anyone to an IMO gold medal, or are there other factors involved? So say you have a student who came to you and he's telling you, I only have 1 year to prepare for the IMO and I want to win big. What will you tell him?
I think in general for Olympiads, it's very important to balance two things. One is to...
How do you manage stress and stay mentally balanced? Can you take us through the silent part when you entered the IMO 2024 exams, and what was happening inside your mind?
Welcome to MathWisdom. We are thrilled to welcome a remarkable young mathematician whose journey in Math Olympiads has inspired students worldwide.
He earned the prestigious gold medal, the International Math Olympiad 2024, helping India achieve its best ever performance in IMO history. Beyond competitions, he's passionate about teaching and mentoring the next generation of problem solvers.
Authoring an exploration of Olympiad combinatorics, a go-to resource filled with practical insights and creative strategies. He's currently studying mathematics and computer science at Oxford University. Join us in welcoming the brilliant, inspiring Ruchil Mathur.
Ruchil, welcome to the show.
I'm really excited to be here.
Many of our listeners are young students inspired by stories of successful Olympians like yourself. It often helps them to see the human side behind achievements. Could you paint us a picture of the environment you grew up in, your family, school, daily life, and how they shaped your attitude toward mathematics?
So I've been born and raised in Mumbai in India, and from a very young age, I did have a little bit of a knack for maths. It was more of just something that I would start doing for fun. For example, start randomly listing out powers of 2, and this was at a time when I didn't know that they are the powers of 2, and just doing silly games about trying to solve tic-tac-toe on my own or things like that. I think my parents were very supportive of me in these sorts of puzzle-based environments where I'm constantly challenged to think, and I think my school was also quite supportive in that sense. And I think that I was generally pushed a lot towards thinking on my own. Of course, it all changed quite drastically when I was introduced to Olympiads. But even before that, the environment was always something, and that's quite important, I think, to push a student towards thinking on their own and asking questions, and rather than just agreeing to a certain formula, thinking about why it should happen or how it should happen.
Can you tell us a little bit about your family? What does your father and your mother do? Did they push you? Did they force it on you? Or was it more like a fun play game?
No. So my parents are both into marketing and quite independent of math, although they did engineering at college. So they've always been extremely supportive. I think the only thing they've always pushed me to do is work very hard. They didn't really care too much about what I am doing. As long as I was working hard and I was putting in my best into what I was doing, they were very happy. And it was always a big cycle of, just putting in your best into whatever you do and not worrying too much about the results. But
was there a specific moment or experience where mathematics shifted from being just another school subject to something you truly loved, to a personal conquest?
So I think there were two moments that I can really think of. One of them was when I first heard about Math Olympiads in 7th grade. That was a really big experience for me because at school I was sort of in this phase where okay, there's a math question. As soon as I look at the question, I generally know how to solve it. It's just a matter of being able to write all the steps down and not lose any marks for silly mistakes. But when I was introduced to these Olympiads, I was introduced to questions where I genuinely had no idea what to do. And it's not like it would take me 1 minute or 2 minutes or 5 minutes to start getting ideas. It often took me hours or days. So, for example, one of the first questions from this Olympiad that I was trying was a basic modular arithmetic question. And at that point, I had no idea about the whole concept of modular arithmetic. So it was almost me sort of building the theory of that on my own until a couple days later, where I finally figured out way to actually solve the question. And that was a very big moment for me to reach that point where after a lot of a grind, I've found an answer and it felt like a big achievement. The other big point when I think math became something I genuinely definitely wanted to do was a little even more later when I got into a lot of communities of people who were doing Olympiads. And that pushed me in the sense that I saw that there were a lot of people who were a lot like me and they really liked doing this thing and I connected well with them and I felt like I want to be doing similar things.
So you mentioned two very important things down there. You said that it might take you hours to solve math problem, and you also talked about the community, which I think two very important factors. So for the first one, when you say it takes you hours to solve a problem, so solving a math problem is more like an exploration. You don't have a recipe to do it. It's not like math at school. A problem in Math Olympiads seems impossible. Intellect Olympiads is very hard. When working on such problems, you are an explorer, and the explorer is the one who's lost. And if you don't get lost, you understood nothing. Do you think this is accurate?
Yeah, I think it's like very accurate. The only thing I would say is, I mean, I would not think of Math Olympiad problems as hard or impossible. The word I like to use is challenging. So the optimal sort of problems are ones that challenge you to think in new ways and push you beyond what you're already comfortable with. And I think that's something that Olympiads are often able to do.
I think another point in which Math Olympiads differs from math at school is that math at school might teach you to work hard, but what is more important than that is how you work. And I saw in a previous interview of yours that you are very hardcore about the idea of why, asking why at each step. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, I think there are two parts about like asking the question why. One of them is more as just a fundamentalist way of like thinking about the subject mathematics, where, when we, for example, learn how to add 5-digit numbers, there's the whole process of carry forwards. And at some level, maybe you have a vague idea of why this is happening, but you often don't really stop and ask yourself that, why did we add in this one on this number? And it's sort of built in from a very young age that you shouldn't ask any questions as to like why this happened, rather just like there's an algorithm to do this and you should follow it. And I think that is something I think can be really disheartening for a student who is trying to get into maths. And it's the exact opposite of what you need to do at Olympiads. So yeah, I think one thing, for example, that I can also think of is sort of, for example, the origin of numbers, where, earlier there were only like rational numbers or something. And then someone was like, okay, why can't we have square root of 2 as an actual number to consider? And then people started thinking of real numbers. Then people were like, why can't square root of -1 be a real thing? And then people started considering imaginary numbers. Someone might have asked, why can't 1 + 1 be 0? And that's where you get like modular arithmetic and stuff like that. Why can't a number line be a number circle, for example? These are all questions that have basically led to entire new fields of math. And I think it's very important to keep pushing people to question the most basic things, because one thing is that they might learn the answers and understand where things come from. And the second thing is they might reject the answers and come up with entirely new fields of math alone.
And do you think like we need to ask the why question at every single step, even when it comes to the definition of something? So I see two ideas here. Whether you ask why at every step, and you try to understand what's going on behind, which is a very great idea. But the other thing is that there are some ideas or concepts that we just need to accept. And sometimes the student is asking why about a definition or something which there is no why behind. And the only thing the student needs at this moment is to accept. And if the student does not get an answer to his why, he feels like he did not understand nothing. But the truth is there is nothing to be understood. He just needs to accept it. What do you think about that?
Yeah. I think it is true to some extent. And definitely I do think that, especially at a younger age, there will be things that you need to sort of, regardless of whether you very deeply understand yet, you should be able to do, because it's important to have a sort of a basic arithmetic skill to be able to work through your way in a lot of mathematical things. Yeah, I think it's definitely true that, there are axioms and we can't always question an axiom. But even at that point, I think it's useful to think about why you would choose something to be the definition, why you would choose it to be an axiom, and whether it's necessarily important. For example, this is more of a college thing, but when you define probability, there are often 3 of these axioms. And one of them is like probability is at least 0, and there's a additivity of them and stuff like that. One thing I learned about recently is, when you're doing something like quantum computing, the whole start of the whole field comes from the fact that you question these axioms and you get rid of one of them. And the point is that the way quantum mechanics works is that it breaks one of those basic axioms of probability, and that probabilities don't need to add up because of the wave nature or anything. And it's not very relevant as to how this happened or why this happened. But the real point is that someone decided to question, what happens if you break the most basic, obvious axiom of probability? And it has led to like a huge field of computing and is creating a big change in the...
Yeah, but this might not be practical for students learning. I mean, it might be okay for researchers to ask why about the axioms, but if you are a 20 years old student, or if you are starting with Math Olympiads, sometimes you need to have to accept a starting point. Like, for example, we cannot ask, why do we say that parallel lines never meet? Something like that. I totally agree that asking why is very important, but sometimes it might get exaggerated and it will do more harm than benefits to the student.
Yeah, I think there should be a point where to accept some things. For example, even within Olympiads, there will be a lot of, for example, proofs which seem to have no motivation whatsoever. And, you should always stop and ask, okay, what was the idea behind this proof? But sometimes there is no great answer. Sometimes the answer to this question is just like, it just comes. Yeah, there will always be these crazy moments in mathematics where you may not always have the optimal answer. I think it is still useful to stop and consider the aspect of asking this question, but you shouldn't stop your entire world until you get the answer. For example, when you mentioned that parallel lines don't meet, of course they could meet, and then you have defined projective geometry, and that's an entire field of Olympiad math. So there are a lot of things that can work out, but I do agree that if every definition is questioned until you can make sense out of everything, you may not actually get anywhere. So it's important to strike a balance.
What are some common misconceptions you've encountered about Math Olympiads?
This is an interesting one. I think that a lot of people believe that to get into Math Olympiads, you need to be like really good with numbers, for example, or really good at math at school. I think that there's very little correlation between the two things. I think Math Olympiads is closer to how good you're at solving puzzles, or like how good you are at just thinking about things for a lot of time. I think school math is not always a great representative of that. And people might also think that, at school, if I've not been able to get any way to do it in the last 30 seconds, I'm not doing great. But Olympiad math is a lot about spending long time on questions. So people should really understand that they shouldn't get afraid because they were not able to solve an Olympiad question, because they are meant to be that hard. If you can solve 1 out of 10 of them, that is an achievement. Another misconception that I think might happen is that, you can attempt these Olympiads, but the people who are at the very top are these incredibly, incredibly smart people who we just cannot be. I think I might have also had a little bit of this when I was starting out, but over time, especially when I got into this community of math enthusiasts, I realized that these people are a lot like me, especially like, for example, I was talking to people who had been to the IMO, and I was like, okay, they're not that different from me. And that gave me a lot of confidence. And I think people should have this confidence that they have everything it takes. And it's a lot about just the passion. It's not about, starting in 3rd grade and like preparing for this your entire life or something. It's about how passionate you are, how deep your interest is.
You're touching on a very important point here. So you said it's more about the passion. Isn't it a goal as well for yourself? Like, did you aim to win a medal at the IMO, or did not get up?
I think this is something that was quite interesting for me. So I mean, definitely IMO was a dream for me throughout. Towards 10th grade, I think, which was like my penultimate time attempting for this, I had reached the team selection tests, and I was very deeply attached to this goal of making it to the IMO team. And my selection tests went really bad. I think I would correlate this quite a bit to the pressure I was taking. It had become a lot more to, for example, reaching the IMO than just enjoying some brilliant questions on those selection tests. And I think without an ambition to, for example, reach the IMO team, it would be a lot harder for me to work as hard. But on the other side of it, if you get clouded by that ambition, it can be hard to put in your best at every step. So in my last year, I was quite unconcerned about making the IMO team. I was mostly doing things for fun. I did a lot of teaching. I was just playing around. I didn't actually do much preparation at all. I did a bit of revision before the contest, but it was mostly just for fun. And then things went really well. I don't think that year I was even thinking about making the IMO team. It was mostly just for fun. I think, yeah, when I was able to let go of all of the expectations or the possibilities or the things that could go wrong, that allowed me to focus on just looking at 3 problems on my contest and really enjoying the process of solving them, and of course being able to do my best on that contest.
You're saying that when you switched to play mode and when you did not pay much attention to the end goal, you scored a gold medal at the IMO. And I think that what a student should be working towards is not necessarily the end goal, especially in Math Olympiad. It's more about the skills you developed along the way. It's about the person you become along the process. And switching to play mode and just have fun, do what you have to do, and don't get attached to the fruits of your action.
I think the other thing is also, if Olympiads do have a lot of luck involved, in the sense that especially at this level where only 6 people from the country are making the IMO team, there will be a lot of people who are very deserving, and you're definitely one of them at that stage. But things may not go your way. And I think if you are too concerned about the end goal, you might start questioning, maybe I should have spent my entire high school doing something else. But when I started thinking about things like this, and it was a pretty dark phase, I realized that, even if someone told me that I'm never going to make the IMO team and my selection tests are not going to go well at all, I would still want to prepare the same way, just because I really enjoyed the whole process. I made a lot of friends. I learned a lot of new things. It gave me skills in problem solving that are going to help me throughout my life. So I wouldn't want to take any of it down.
That's a great thought experiment. So imagine that you will not get the end goal. Will you still be working for it?
Mm-hmm.
And here you get your answer. So I heard this from many IMO gold medalists. When you started or when you noticed that you are progressing and you're doing very well, did it feel like luck at first? Did you say, okay, I got it because I'm lucky? Or you had a totally different experience?
I think there are some leaps of faith, in the sense that, especially the first time you do things, like the first time I cleared my national Olympiad in 9th, it felt like, a lot of things went my way, and they may not have gone my way. For example, in the last half an hour, some problem, I just realized that, I can actually just solve this. And until then, I'd made no progress on any of the questions. So I would still say that, everything you do on these Olympiads, you have worked hard and you deserve it. But it's kind of not an if and only if. So you might deserve something and it doesn't go your way, but I don't think you should push something onto luck just because things went well. You've done a lot of hard work and you deserve some luck also.
Yeah, the struggle is guaranteed, but the final result is not. Mm-hmm. Realistically speaking, do you believe that determination and consistent hard work alone can lead anyone to an IMO gold medal, or are there other factors involved?
I think I had determination and everything, and I may not have had an IMO gold medal in many alternate universes. I wouldn't say that just having this is enough. There are a lot of factors. I think that it's also not the most important thing in the world. Just having a lot of determination towards something is a thing that's going to help you in a much larger picture than getting an IMO gold medal. And getting an IMO gold medal does sound like a very big thing, but to me, honestly, it's just the whole process that became a much larger thing. So to give an explicit answer, no, I don't think it's enough. I think there are factors like luck that come in between. I think that, there's nothing else that you really need to be doing if that's your goal.
So say you have a student who came to you and he's telling you, I only have 1 year to prepare for the IMO and I want to win big. What will you tell him?
I think this has happened quite a few times. So generally the answer I give them is, especially when they have 1 year left, that do it if and only if you enjoy it. Because you don't want to be saying at the end of this year that, okay, this was my final year and I could have been doing so many things. I decided to put all my time into this one thing and it didn't even go well. So if you do really enjoy it, you will never be saying that to yourself. And in that case, it's great. But if you do have even this slight feeling that I want to do it only if I'm going to end up doing well, it may not be worth it in your last year. If you have a couple of years to go, I think it's okay, even if you think it's like currently a bit goal-based, because by the time you start spending a lot of time, you will slowly develop that passion as well. But I think if you're doing it in your last year, you should already have a lot of passion for it. Otherwise, it may not feel like it was worth it.
So you said that when you started doing the IMO and you saw all these geniuses, you felt a little bit intimidated. So how did you deal with that? I agree that comparison is the thief of joy, and there will always be someone who is doing better than you. How did you transform those feelings or those emotions, and how did you overcome them?
I think it was never really intimidation. It was more of awe, in the sense that, oh my God, how can someone be this good? Personally, I never expected to achieve any of the things they did at that point. So I was not really feeling like I can just never reach that way, because that was not as much of a goal back then. It was more of just like small goals and taking one step at a time. I do think that it changed a lot when essentially there was this one community in India called the Sophie Fellowship, which was being run by some IMO medalists. It was a very student-run sort of program. So all of the teachers were people who had been to the IMO over the past 1 or 2 years from India. And they were like taking sessions themselves for us and playing chess with us and, making silly jokes with us, planning birthday parties with us, things like that. And that gave me this whole feeling that, they're as human as I am. And then it became a lot more about trying to be like them once I realized that I'm not particularly different.
So it's the community that lifts you up.
Yeah.
And being in such an elite community, seeing all these smart people around you, what relationship do you think we should have with our inner critique? And by that, I mean, sometimes you feel dumb. I think everybody who tried doing the IMO or preparing for Math Olympiads felt dumb at a certain point. What does your inner voice tell you at this moment, and how do you deal with that?
I think from my experience of Olympiads, it's always been a very positive place in terms of friendships and everything. Even 1 week before the selection test, people will be sharing ideas with each other about, oh, there's this new theorem that recently came out which could help with like a moving points argument, and people like coming up with ideas together. It's not really about, for example, oh, I have this secret set of techniques and I must not share this with anyone because it's my best chance of making the IMO team. So we were all quite close friends. And I think that helped a lot, because if you're alone in the race, it's a lot easier to get depressed and feel like nothing's going your way. But when you have a lot of friends, you feel like you're on a journey together, and maybe they did better than you this year, but they're also the people who are sort of your, in a way, role models, even though they're your friends, and they push you forward and you push them forward. I think, maybe the point when I felt quite down was in 11th grade after my selection test. That inner thought experiment helped me a lot, and just speaking to a lot of my friends helped a lot. And most of all, realizing that I was doing this because I had a passion for the subject, not for any other reason.
You also gave back to the community who lifted you. As you transitioned from Olympiad participant to teacher, what insights or lessons emerged that you did not anticipate during your competitive journey?
I think this is something interesting, because I have this very strong claim that I learned a lot more as a teacher than I did as a student in these Olympiads, where, okay, I learned a lot as a student as well, but there were things that when I started teaching, it was more because it was something fun and I thought it could be cool. But I realized that, especially when I started taking a lot of topics that I myself wasn't very good at, I was sort of forced into getting a bit of a deeper understanding. Or if I didn't, then, my students would constantly ask me things like, okay, but why? And like, how is this happening? This doesn't seem very motivated. How would you come up with this proof? And when you have to sort of answer these questions, it sort of forces you to start thinking a lot more deeply. So I also, for example, wrote this book on combinatorics. And when I was writing one of the chapters on greedy algorithms, I like I had a good understanding of the topic, like greedy algorithms, think of like silly ideas and like try to the most basic algorithm, where does it lead, things like that. But I realized when I was writing this chapter that there are sort of these three different sorts of problems which use these algorithms. And one of them is, for example, where you have to sort of prove that the algorithm ends. And one of them is where you have to show that it's optimal. One of them is where you have to show that it's good enough. And all of these have their own techniques and tricks. And just like being able to compartmentalize a lot of these ideas is, I think, quite important for Olympiads. And I think I only got it when I started teaching. And yeah, so maybe the one line answer for this would be, I think teaching helped me a lot into compartmentalizing a lot of different ideas where I had a lot of things in my mind, but now I was able to, as soon as I look at a problem, think among a lot of things that I knew about, like sort of where does this exactly fit in, rather than it just being in.
Did you release your book before gaining before?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I wrote this book in 12th, so it was mostly written by December or something. But I think it got released about a month before the IMO, or maybe 2 months before the IMO, actually.
That's impressive because you had nothing in hand and you still wrote a book. So I mean, winning the gold medal was a very good publicity for the book and it gave you more credibility. But going with the idea to share a book, even though at that moment nobody knows about you, maybe in India, yes, but outside of India, that goes to show how passionate you were.
Yeah, I think I was mostly writing this in the sense that if the book is something that is very useful to people, it will naturally gain publicity. For example, I did think that combinatorics was one field where there was no outstanding resource, in the sense that most books were either a bit too easy or they were a bit too hard. And many of them didn't explain how to come up with ideas very well. And I felt like this is some place where my book actually does like a really good job, because over time I had been able to get a very good idea about how to come up with things. And I thought that this book did a pretty good job of explaining that. So I wasn't really too concerned about, where my name stands in all of this. But yeah, it was mostly about just trying to help people and get them into these Olympiad things.
So the book is about strategies, tips and tricks that can be used in the Olympiads.
Yeah, I think the way I generally talk about it is the two things is, one, that it's very conversational. So it's almost like a reader is it's not explicitly like that, but it's almost as if a reader is asking me, okay, this is interesting, but why would you do this? How can you come up with this kind of idea? And then there's an answer as to, that's true, this is not the most obvious first steps. In fact, many of my solutions start with, okay, let's try this. And then you realize, oops, this just doesn't work at all. Why didn't it work? Maybe this is the issue. And this is leading us into thinking into a slightly different sort of way and sort of motivating different ideas.
Can you share with us some universal strategies, tips and tricks?
I think, yeah. So in general for Olympiads, it's very important to balance two things. One is to be able to push through ideas a lot, because a lot of times you get the right idea at some point while trying the problem, and then you think, but this can't work. And then you start trying something else. The other side to it is, you keep trying one specific thing when it's just doomed to fail and you have to think of something entirely different. So it's important on an Olympiad question to be able to A, stick with ideas, and B, give up on them and find the right balance between these two worlds. More explicit ideas, for example, exist, like in geometry, you should maybe think about whether angles are more relevant or lengths seem like better to solve this problem, whether it's a more projective statement or more a statement which could be better solved with, for example, inversion. So there are a lot of course, tricks and things. I think that these come a lot with practice. So the biggest advice I would give is just solve a lot of problems, keep practicing. Eventually you will start finding patterns and different ideas. And yeah, always ask yourself as to, especially when you don't solve a question, what could I have done differently to maybe solve this problem? And then try to incorporate that into your person.
In the field of combinatorics, specifically, there are some common strategies like the min-max strategy, like also wishful thinking or finding an intermediate step, or especially trying small cases. I think in the Otis program, you call that soft methods.
Yeah.
Do you have any other ideas or strategies like these ones?
No, I definitely think soft techniques is like an extremely important thing. In fact, I took a couple of lectures at different camps about just soft techniques. In fact, not even soft techniques. I think just if you spend a lot of time looking at small cases of a problem, a lot of problems that would just straight up die down to that. I think a lot of people get intimidated by just the sort of size of a 2025 × 2025 board or something like that. But if you just start thinking at like smaller scales, that might help a lot. There are other things. For example, especially in combinatorics, it can be useful to try to understand whether the problem is more global or local. Again, in the Otis philosophy, this is usually used where some problems require you to think about a very specific part of the problem and not care too much about the bigger picture. That's sort of related to greedy algorithms, or maybe you're looking at only the starting part of the sequence and then you'll induct about the rest. There are other sorts of problems where you need to look at everything together and take a summation or find the expected value of some quantity as the average one. And it can be very useful to, while looking at a problem, for example, realize that, but a local idea just can't work here, because if you try to optimize something locally, it just really messes up everything else. Or a global idea can't work here because you're trying to find something very specific, and it's probably going to be a very extreme situation where something randomly works, but it won't work out in general. So it's useful to sort of ask yourself these questions into, like, I have a lot of strategies in my mind, but like, what sort of strategies are just not going to work here, or what sort of strategies do you think could work here?
That's funny because the local and global concept. I do some teaching, and I've never saw the Otis syllabus, but we call it the macro point of view and the microscopic point of view, which goes back to the same thing. So for those wondering, for example, if you use the min-max principle, you are focusing on a borderline case, which is a local or microscopic point of view. And if you take a global quantity that describes the whole problem, now you're changing your point of view and you're taking a global approach to the problem. Could you walk us through your personal preparation routine leading up to the IMO?
Yeah, I think my preparation was quite random in the sense that, in the middle of the day, I open the Art of Problem Solving website. I see an interesting looking problem. Okay, no one solved this yet. Seems like a nice functional equation. Let's try it. And then I'm just like maybe sitting in a car going somewhere, and I'm just meanwhile thinking in my head. And this is what happens when you're really passionate about something. Like, I think something that a lot of people say is, if you're not thinking about math in the shower, you should not be doing math. And it's a lot more about just doing things naturally. I did at some points have a timetable, in the sense that, okay, this week I want to grind through a lot of geometry. Next week I will maybe learn a lot of inequalities. But more than that, it was more of across the year. I was just like trying a lot of problems and having fun with different sort of ideas. And yeah, I generally ended up having timetables about doing other things, because I didn't want to spend like all my time doing Olympiads, and that would happen if I didn't have a timetable. So most of my timetables were like, okay, yes, most of my day is Olympiads, but yes, this 1 hour I do want to do this, something else. So it was more of the...
You have a timetable to avoid doing the Olympiads, not to make slots for the Olympiads.
Given a slot is just Olympiad by default.
So you spend your day by default doing math, and sometimes you take a rest.
Yeah, if I'm... No, I do think, however, that it's important to take a lot of break from doing math, because if you do too much of it, you could get a burnout, and that's definitely not a good thing, because you want to always stay fresh when you're thinking about hard problems. So it's not like I did too much of it, but yeah, I was never really thinking about how many hours I'm spending doing something, because it's just something I would do naturally.
Were there other resources other than the Art of Problem Solving that you found particularly effective?
I think Otis was really nice. So I was a part of the Otis program first as a student, and then later I became an instructor there and taught people as well. I learned a lot of these sorts of strategies, because a lot of these books, they teach you, for example, techniques like Vieta jumping. But what Otis really helped me understand is, okay, Vieta jumping as a technique exists, but like, how do you know when to use it? And that's the sort of thing that was useful there. There was also Sophie Fellowship, as I mentioned earlier, where because they were sort of only a year or two older than us and they had gone through these things very recently, they had their own opinions and strategies, and they shared those quite well with us. There's also the online math club program that's run in India, although I think it's open for anyone from the world to join. And there's like weekly sessions and problem sets, and there's a pretty big community there. So there's a lot of things to learn from.
Some students are really passionate about math and they enjoy solving problems and they get intellectually stimulated when they do math. But the problem is that some students cannot focus for a long time. They easily get distracted, especially with social media. Did you struggle with that? And what advices would you give them?
I think maybe this is more of a personal family thing. Yeah, I got social media very late. I didn't even have a phone until like 7th grade or something. And like, yeah, I never really struggled too much with this personally. I mean, I do imagine that it's becoming a pretty big thing today. I think, yeah, I think the thing I would say though is if you really do find passion in something, then you should be able to take that leap and be able to push your way through a distraction. And it's okay, in fact, to get distracted a bit. Sometimes it gives you a break from thinking about a problem, and then you can come back and think of a new idea. But of course, if it's ending up spending a lot of your time on a social media app, that might not be great for you. And yes, for me also, it was maybe a bit of family where it was never really a question on whether I would be getting social media anytime.
So that's also another common point among super achievers in the IMO, which is they don't have social media, or even if they have it, they will have it at a very late age. The problem is the kid at young age, he does not control their parents, allow him or not to have social media. And many students today get easily distracted, and it's very frustrating, even though they love and enjoy mathematics, but they cannot improve because they easily turn into social media, which is a real threatening addiction today. I think that boredom is underrated because boredom and silence is where creativity bubbles up. And with constant stimulation from social media, one can easily get distracted. I think students should give themselves permission to be bored, and because the answer they are looking for is in the silence they are avoiding.
Yeah, that's quite nicely said, yeah.
And this problem is spreading, at a high speed today. This is something I did not have when I was preparing for the IMO, for example, like more than 10 years ago, but it's starting to be a real issue today, and students should be aware of that, especially parents.
Yeah. I think it's also important to recognize this issue in the sense that it's not something that, for example, if you have recognized that the social media thing is becoming an addiction, I'm sure that you can take the relevant steps in the sense that delete the apps. If you think that you could be doing something else and you recognize it completely and this is something that's becoming a problem. But yeah, the issue also ends up being that you don't realize how much it's affecting you and you think it's all okay, but yeah, it ends up becoming a big problem later.
Yeah, there's a saying, when you bring awareness to darkness, the darkness will disappear.
Mm-hmm.
Once you're aware of the issue, you have almost already solved it. So mental sharpness and resilience in competitions often rely on an overall well-being and balanced habits. Do you follow any specific diet or fitness routine or meditation routine for maintaining an optimal mental performance?
I kind of have like no answer for this. I don't really have any diet or meditation routine or anything of that sort. Yeah, I don't really know.
But you have some extracurricular activities. So I saw you do the piano.
Yeah, I do play the piano, but it's more of just like, okay, I'm bored. There's a piano in front of me. Let's start playing it. It's not really something I plan or something that I think that I need to do explicitly. It's more of just following hobbies.
Before an important exam, do you have any rituals to put yourself into the flow mode?
I think I try to sleep a lot. I like to stay fresh before the exam. So I sleep early, wake up just before so that I'm maximizing the amount of time I get to sleep. And that helps me stay sort of fresh. I also like to just stay positive, not necessarily think too much about the bigger picture, or for example, especially on selection tests when there are 4 of them and you're going for the first one or you're going for the second one and your first one went well, it can be easy to get like carried away and start thinking about how everything will go. But it's important to just like ignore these thoughts and maybe listen to some nice songs and just stay relaxed and focused on the 3 problems.
How do you manage stress and stay mentally balanced?
Yeah, so I mean, in 11th, I didn't do it very well and I did suffer. In 12th, I think the solution was that, yeah, I didn't care too much about the result and stress mostly went away on its own. I mean, in general, though, I do feel like that some stress is good in the sense that it pushes you to do your best, especially, for example, when there's half an hour of a contest left. If you're doing it purely because you enjoy it, you might just say, okay, now I'm bored. Let's do something else. But when you have that extra bit of ambition to do your best, you're going to be grinding through every last thing in those last 30 minutes. And I think, yeah, so I did have a little bit of that as well. But yeah, it should not be to the point where you start taking too much stress about it. It should just be just enough to keep you pushing throughout the exam.
What was your biggest aha moment?
I think this is a slightly contradicting question, because I think the thing that I find interesting is that with Math Olympiad problems, almost every time you solve a problem, you'll have an aha moment. It's not necessary that any of these will be extremely big, but it'll just be that the constancy of these aha moments every time you're doing a problem is what keeps you going. Yeah, if you ask me for one explicit one, it'll be quite hard for me to answer. Maybe I think one that I like to tell my sort of school friends about who have not done a lot of Olympiads is this question where there are a couple of ants on a rod, and some of them are moving towards the left and some of them are moving towards the right. And every time two of them bump, they reverse directions. And then you need to sort of find the maximum time for which they can stay on the rod, given the length of the rod, and that all ants are at the same speed, and that speed is given. And the very cool idea here is that when they bump and reverse directions, one of them is going to the left, one of them is going to the right. But if you forgot that they reverse directions, still one of them is going to the left and one of them is going to the right. And the ants look the same to you. So you can actually forget about all bumps and just imagine each ant is just going from left to right or right to left. And then it's just like a totally trivial problem. So that's a quite crazy aha moment, in the sense that, okay, the problem explicitly told you that something is happening, that they have to reverse directions. And you were like, nah, I don't really want them to do that.
When was that? At what age?
This was quite early. I think this was in a book I was reading. And when I read the solution, I was like, wait, what? That can't be legal. Surely this is something wrong. And I think this was maybe like 8th or 9th grade. And yeah, it was quite a crazy moment. At that point, maybe I didn't appreciate as much as I should have. Then maybe I think a couple of months later, when I was reading it again, I was like, wait, this was actually crazy. And yeah, this is an example that also sticks with me quite a lot, because I think anyone understands it. You don't need to have any background in Olympiads to sort of understand what's going on in this problem. And then this is also my sales pitch of saying that do Olympiads. There are problems like this. They don't require you to like be good at multiplying 5-digit numbers. They just require you to have this creative mindset.
Do you think anyone should be doing Math Olympiads?
I think you should do them if you enjoy them. I think one thing that I do think is everyone should be exposed to them. In India, very few people are well aware of Olympiads, in the sense that we have this other Olympiad which goes by the same name, INMO, which is done at a school level. And if I tell someone I have an INMO gold, they would generally assume that it's that INMO. And, you know, in every school, one person is going to get an INMO gold in every grade there. And getting an INMO gold like means nothing to the average member of our society here. So I think everyone should be exposed to these sorts of more challenging Olympiads where you have to think and solve a lot of advanced problems. Of course, you may not find that deep-rooted passion in yourself for it, but you should give yourself the chance. And I do believe that everyone has their own things that they will find themselves to be truly connected to. But I do think that people should be a lot more willing to give math a chance in that process.
And no, give it a chance, not in order to win any competition. Just enjoy it. Have fun.
Yeah, for sure. I also think the way math is taught at school, it can be a bit intimidating if like you think you're not very good at it. But yeah, you should be willing to give Olympiad math the chance, in the sense that think of it as a zero correlation event to school math and just give it a chance.
That's true. I know students who are very good at Math Olympiads and their results at school is just average. What was your happiest moment?
I think sort of the expected answer might be, you know, when I won the IMO gold medal, but I don't think that is the true answer. In fact, I can't think of any one explicit moment when I was extremely happy, but just the process of doing these problems, every time I would come up with a cool idea, I was really excited. I think one thing that maybe was a big moment for me was when my book was officially published, and I felt like this was sort of the apex of my Olympiad career, in the sense that even more than getting the IMO gold medal, it's this book that sort of defines my whole Olympiad journey.
Is the book available in Europe? Because I tried to get a copy, but I did not find any.
Yeah, it's been a bit of a mess. There was, I think, a period when it was more available, and then some issues ended up happening. I think the answer is that yes, it will be available maybe in a month or a couple months for sure. It's a bit of a slow process because the people running it need to go through some checks and stuff. But as of now, I think there is a way to get it outside Europe by contacting the publishers, but it's quite messy. I think soon it should be there on Amazon, and then I think it'll be easier.
So your gold medal of 2024, was that expected?
No, not at all. I think the way I went to the IMO, I would have been happy with bronze or silver as well. I would have liked to get a medal, but I wasn't really thinking about getting gold. In fact, I don't think I had a gold level performance on most of the mock exams I gave before the IMO, although those were, I think, a lot harder just to give us practice. I wasn't thinking too much about the medal. I was more thinking about just doing my best and hopefully not doing too badly.
Can you take us to the silent part when you entered the IMO 2024 exam, and what was happening inside your mind? What were you thinking about before solving the problem, after solving P1, P2? What went through your mind?
Yeah, I think a big thing is not thinking too much. If you start overthinking about the whole process, it starts leading to like panic or like, oh my God, this is going too well, or oh my God, this is not going well enough. It's important to stay very objective. So even as a teacher now, when I sort of talk to someone one day before the contest, I just tell them that, yeah, try to stay as objective as possible. Try to push yourself to do the best thing you can do at that moment. Don't think too much about the bigger picture. So, I mean, okay, when I entered, it was obviously a very big honor for me as a person. It felt like this is something that is going to stick with me for my life, like this moment of entering. But I was trying not to think too much at that moment, at least. After the exams, it sort of started settling in that, oh my God, I just had an experience to the IMO. This was a huge thing for me. But at that moment, I was trying to just isolate all these thoughts and just focus on trying to solve the problems. After solving P1 and P2, I think, okay, there was no real change. It was more like, okay, I've solved this problem. This is great. Let's write this up. Let's move on to the next problem. I think I was quite happy because I was able to stay objective during the exams. I think, okay, one funny moment was when I solved P5 when this was, by the way, the turbo P5, which was extremely scam. And when I solved it, I was like, there's no way that works. And maybe that was one funny moment because I spent about 20 minutes just reading the problem and making sure that I've not done something crazily wrong. But apart from that, I was just not thinking too much about the result.
So you are not thinking, for example, you saw P1 and you think, oh, that's the honorable mention guaranteed now. You saw P2 and you think, this is maybe a bronze medal. What about the other guy? I wonder if he solved P2. Oh, I'm afraid this guy is ahead of me.
Okay, maybe the thought I would have is, yeah, if for example, if I see P2 being too easy, this didn't happen at the IMO, but it did happen on one of our selection tests when I saw like a combo P2 or something, and I realized, okay, this was far too easy. And I thought that this was going to be one of my strengths, right? Because it might help me get an edge over some other people. So there are these thoughts that sort of go in your mind thinking about, oh my God, why did they make this problem so easy? If it had been harder, maybe I could have gotten a better chance of doing things. But it's more of a side thought, I think. It was never really about how others are doing too much. Maybe there were moments where I thought about that, but it was more of, I was able to tell myself for the most part that my performance is all that matters right now.
It seems to me that to effortlessly stay calm, that's a big issue a lot of people are struggling with, and it comes naturally to you.
I think it was not always there. Like, there were definitely a lot of times when I was just not able to stay calm. But I think that I realized that it was very important. And then I took an active effort to make sure that I stay. I did a lot of mocks. That is something that probably helped, because if IMO is the first sort of exam of this sort you're giving and you've never really sat in a place for 4.5 hours, okay, of course you've given selection tests and going to the IMO, but if you've not given too many of them, you might panic a lot. But I'd given enough of these mocks to sort of go through the motions a lot of times where, you know, maybe a mock isn't going too well and I'm panicking. But slowly, as you give a lot of them, it gets more and more objective. So I think that helped.
Do you consider yourself a religious person?
It's not that I don't believe in religion, but I also don't believe in, I don't believe in, like, especially God or something. But I do think that, for example, there's maybe a force that guides us through and helps us in our tough times. But yeah, I mean, there's no specific prayer I would say before the IMO, for example.
I was trying to dig deeper into the secret of your dumbness.
Yeah, I think maybe some of it also comes from a bit of this family perspective where at home it was always like, my parents would push me to work very, very hard, but always before, for example, school exams, this would be pushed very deeply into my head that, okay, however you do tomorrow, Rochelle, we're very proud of you and the result doesn't matter and it'll all be fine. And even before the IMO, I would get a lot of these things from them. So I think they had a big part in making me feel confident about my result not being defined by this one day of contest, rather the effort I've been putting into things for a very long time.
So 2024 was a big year for India, and you were there to witness it. What were the key factors that led to such an extraordinary outcome and the best ranking of India in history and the history of IMO?
To be honest, I think we all kind of expected it to be like a really, really good year because we were all doing really well on a lot of these mocks and we had some like friendly contests with other countries and I think we did like extremely well on them. I think the reasoning behind how this all ended up happening is maybe two things. One is that we had one contestant, Pranjal Srivastav, who won 3 gold medals for India over the last few years before my year. I think over 2019, 21, 22, I think 2020, India didn't participate because of COVID. And I think that when people heard a lot about him, that got a lot more people interested and a lot more people started believing that they can do really, really well at the IMO because there's this person who can do so incredibly well. And he was also heavily involved in, like, for example, the Sophie Fellowship and teaching us himself. So it gave us this feeling that we can be like him. The other thing was the setting up of a lot of these communities, like where there was a lot of student peer sort of training where we're learning from each other a lot, and that pushed us a lot. I do think that it's not like a peak as such. I think India could do even better in the coming years. It's been a pretty upward slope overall. I think this year we did slightly worse than that. Like we came 7th, but it was like very close with like, I think 3 or 4 teams being within like a 1 or 2 point margin. But yeah, I think there is a lot of ongoing growth of these Olympiad things in India. Last year, there was also a big tweet by our Prime Minister about how we did. So I think that got even more people interested. So it's a big positive feedback loop.
What do you think about this year's IMO?
I was quite sad about it in the context of how it would be for India, because I think 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 were all quite reasonable and 6 was basically impossible to solve in contest for most of us. At that point, it becomes a lot more luck based in the sense that if someone misses a silly thing on P3 or has a bad day on one of the days, it's going to hurt a lot because the other countries are going to be quite able to solve all of these problems. So generally, you want the IMO to be somewhere where it's very good at differentiating skill at a lot of different places. For example, if P3 had been a little harder but easier than P6, then I think results could have been very different. Also, I think most of the Indian team was extremely good at geometry. It would have been nice to see a Geo P3, P6, but yeah.
During those last few years at the IMO, does it feel like there are more than 3 levels? So it feels like P3 and P6 are not on the same level, as if we have easy, medium, hard, and very hard, which has been the case for P6 this year, and I think for also the recent years as well. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I think it's not even just 4. I think every problem has its own difficulty. But yeah, I think P6 is like as hard as it gets. I think it's arguably one of the hardest problems ever. If not, I don't think it's the hardest, but one of the hardest for sure. A P3, on the other hand, I think could even have been a P2, P5 on some other years in terms of difficulty. So yeah, I think I don't think it's something people are actively trying to do, like make P3 easier, P6 harder. For example, I think last in my year, P3 was arguably the harder out of P3 and P6. So I'm not sure which one got more solves, but at least personally, I thought P6 was more approachable. But I do think that there is definitely a lot more than just easy medium.
So we are at the end. Do you have anything else you want to say?
Not too much. Maybe, yeah. I mean, yeah, I think the most important point that I want to get across is that do things because you're passionate about them, not because of wanting to get a medal at the end.
Perfect. Thank you. So now we will move to the live solve.